Tropes. The use of that word has died down a little in recent months, thankfully. Some of you meeting me may not know this, but I despise the word trope in its modern form. Kind of like how people overuse the word aesthetic to the point that it has grown its own brand of problematic. Mainly on Instagram, but on YouTube as well, I have seen people recently take to using the word trope to describe just about anything that performs a function within a story. And yes, the word existed long prior to its recent explosion, and does indeed serve a purpose in a writer's tool belt. But many have taken it to be the catch-all word for any cog in the overall function of a story. I've seen people refer to flat characters as a trope, but even beyond that, there are actual tropes that are proven to be not only mind-numbingly repetitive, but also harmful, such as the infamous In this video, I want to explore where its popularity may have come from and why it's so convenient for new writers and even established ones to frame their work. And here's a secret: they don't use it for the same reason. Part 1. I love a good found family as much as the next queer, don't get me wrong. I also love secret organizations, and a few other repeated tropes that exist within narratives. However, I also recognize that tropes only exist to provide a framework for a certain aspect of the plot. They are used to establish a base atmosphere. For example, let's take secret organizations. What comes into your head when I say that? Personally, I would think of Organization 13 from Kingdom Hearts, the Akatsuki from Naruto, the Death Eaters from Harry, and the Black Aha from the Wheel of Time, etc., etc. And what's something all of these have in common? They're all dark. Dark in name, dark in clothing, dark in purpose, and a dark atmosphere in general. And if you pair that with the number 13, as many in this list do, you get a recipe for something sinister, if a little cliche. Now yes, I said secret organizations, which could also include Dumbledore's Army from the Order of the Phoenix. There is a flip side to this coin of benevolent secret organizations, but we'll gloss over those for now since they're equally as relevant as an example, but I've chosen the dark side. So, let's say you've got a secret organization in your story. Well, as I just said, there are two sides to that coin, but in a story there could also be a middle ground. A neutral organization, if you will. This might fall in line with your narrative if you're going for a gray morality overall. They're after their own goals that are selfish, but not terribly harmful, all things considered. Like if your group wanted to acquire a long-lost artifact, but in order to do it, they would have to break into a tomb. Is it wrong to rob graves? Sure. But this artifact is a long-lost family heirloom that was wrongfully placed thousands of years ago, or something. So it's not black and white. Now, do you see how the word secret organization as a trope can branch off into broader perspectives with just the slightest tweak? Trope is only a title, a thread of commonality between stories in this cytoplasmic goop of the human subconscious. It's not law by any means. The tool of a trope has developed into a catch-all phrase for anything within a story, as I said before. People will use the word before describing an entirely different concept, such as character development. Like in my earlier example, a flat character is not a trope. I have heard the word trope originally and most accurately described as commonalities between just specific genres of fiction. For example, in horror, there's the trope of the final girl, meaning the surviving character of the narrative who outwits whatever devious entity she's facing at that time and outliving her other companions. And I can go into even more detail about this trope, but it suffices to say that this trope does not exist within the fantasy or romance or sci-fi genres. It was birthed from horror, and it may bleed over if a book utilizes horror, but it's most commonly found in spookier stories. To list a few more, we have the farm boy in fantasy, the Galactic Federation in sci-fi, the grilled detective in thrillers, and in romance. These I'm comfortable to call tropes. However, the word expanded in recent years, and if there's one thing I would like to blame, it's anime. Or at least anime played a huge role in normalizing and romanticizing cliches. Don't get me wrong, I love anime. Not like as a huge fan of it in general, but many series have shaped who I am today. This isn't a morality issue. I'm calling out something that just sort of happened. Anime has popularized the term character arc, which is dangerously close to being overused in some circles, but I digress. A typical shonen anime will include story arcs that vary by season, and one of the worst examples I can think of is the tournament arc. I ask myself every day how people can stand to watch the same thing but with a different face again and again and again. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To satiate anyone who might have been butthurt by that, please note that I have Naruto run in public on more than one occasion. I have paid my penance. Other overused cliches in anime include a tsundere or a yandere, two of the more popular character types who I will not be exploring here. It's just too broad a topic to lecture on, but just know that anime has many different formulas that often repeat between different shows and have become prolific within the fan base. Now with that knowledge, think about how popular anime is and more specifically who it's popular with. And with that we move on to fanfiction. While this is quite obviously not the case always, it is very often that newer writers will begin in the realm of fanfiction. Couldn't be me though.
We traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. You hear me? It's coming from inside the house.
From what I can tell, fanfiction is a way to ease into writing without the struggles that come with creating original characters or plot. But it can also be used to further explore how you interpret a character and push it farther than the actual show did in new and interesting ways. But more often than not, it's kids fresh out of elementary school metaphorically mashing together their action figures online for the world to see. Again, I've paid my time. Newer writers who are just learning about these concepts that make up the structure of a story may be likely to latch onto something like tropes because they're a convenient umbrella for building a narrative. Take any random assortment of tropes from your preferred genre and it isn't impossible to cobble a story out of it. If you take a lesson from anime, you can include overarching plots that come prepackaged and ready for assembly. Now all you need are characters, but don't worry, there are tropes for them too. These buzzwords pulled from the study of fiction and mythology all across the world are now being put together like we're coloring in the numbers and connecting the dots. And while this is all well and good for practice, it's become pervasive in publishing as well. Here's where the use of tropes will differ in established works. Marketing. Marketing is all about speed and punch, taglines and catchphrases and jingles that will catch your attention and stay in your head. Books as a medium, I have found, are more difficult to market because marketing nowadays relies a lot on visual and auditory input. So how can we hook a reader if the most convenient tool we have are words? Well, the answer happens to be the topic of the video. A publisher can string together a list of tropes as taglines to entice a reader. This book contains enemies to lovers, found family, gray villains, an oxymoron, fae, and superpowers. Now someone scrolling might be lured by nice cover art, read that list, and think about how much they love those elements in other stories. They're so hooked it almost doesn't even matter the content of the book. They just know it's made for them because of the description of tropes pressed all the right buttons. And even vice versa. Having a certain trope can turn someone off of a book entirely, sometimes regardless of how well it's done. And I find this is more a subject of genre than substance, but people will blame a specific trope regardless. So in conclusion, I believe it's been a more harmful trend to popularize the word trope. It's now nearly synonymous with cliché, although I noticed one particular tweet going around once, in which a reader says how they hate a certain romance cliché, but in the next line they read the same cliché and fawn over it. And I just wasn't feeling that at all. Although yes, clichés can be done well, I think this open embrace of repetition has an overtly negative outcome on the types of books that grow popular, namely in YA. Everything is starting to sound the same. The types of stories, the types of characters, the writing styles. It all revolves around what sells. And I think the most egregious part of that is that it's not necessarily what the people want. It's what publishing houses push, because even if it's divisive, they know it will sell. I would like to keep a live and let live attitude about this, but I can see through the heart of the trend. And it's a cold, hard dollar printing machine that thrives when creative works are boiled down to their base elements, packaged and sold.